The days began to feel more routine for Emily, though nothing about her life was truly routine. She had come a long way from the woman who had walked into the bar that night. The cracks in her armor, which had once seemed impossible to repair, were slowly being filled by the steady presence of Jack, the gentle rhythm of the ranch, and the quiet solace that the land offered. It wasn't that everything was perfect now. Emily still carried the scars of her past, scars she wasn't sure she'd ever be able to fully forget. But she was learning to live with them, to accept them as part of who she was. For the first time, she felt like she had the strength to move forward, and that in itself was a huge shift. The woman who once avoided looking back was now allowing herself to face the future, whatever it may bring. Jack's quiet support had helped her realize that she didn't have to do it all on her own. That was a lesson Emily had resisted for a long time, but it was one that had slowly worked its way into her heart. Jack never pushed her to talk about her past. He never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. He was simply there, a steady, reliable presence in her life, and that was more than Emily had ever expected or thought she deserved. One afternoon, after spending the morning helping Jack around the ranch, Emily found herself sitting on the porch of her small apartment, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The landscape was breathtaking, the colors of the sky shifting in subtle hues of orange and purple, the quiet of the land wrapped around her like a soft blanket, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt truly at peace. She had always believed that peace was something she could never find. She had spent so many years running both physically and emotionally from the pain of her past, but now, with the sun setting and the wind brushing through the trees, Emily realized that she had found a kind of peace that wasn't about escaping her past. It was about accepting it and then choosing to move forward anyway. It wasn't always easy, of course. There were moments when the old fears crept back into her thoughts. Moments when she wondered if she was really strong enough to keep going, to face the challenges ahead. But each day, as she spent more time with Jack, as she learned the ins and outs of ranch life, she began to believe in herself a little more. And with that belief came the courage to let go of the past, not all at once, but little by little. Jack had become her constant, the steady force in her life that she could rely on. She had never had anyone like that before. Sure, there had been people in her life who had offered her help or support, but they had all wanted something in return. Jack didn't want anything from her. He didn't expect anything in return for his kindness. That was something Emily couldn't fully understand at first. But now, as time passed, it was starting to make sense. One evening, as they worked together to feed the cattle, Emily found herself talking more than she had in weeks. She was starting to open up, to share little bits of her story with Jack. It wasn't a full confession, she wasn't ready for that yet. But it was progress. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, glancing at Jack as they walked toward the barn. "I mean, I didn't think there was a place for someone like me. I've spent so much time trying to outrun everything, trying to escape what I've done, what's been done to me. But here I am, and I'm starting to think that maybe I belong here." Jack nodded, his face unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made Emily feel understood. "You belong wherever you choose to be," he said quietly. "Nobody gets to decide that but you." The simplicity of his words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much of her life allowing others to dictate her worth, her actions, even her dreams. But Jack had shown her that she didn't need anyone's permission to be herself. She was allowed to define who she was, and she was allowed to choose the kind of life she wanted to live. That realization was both freeing and terrifying. It meant that the responsibility for her life now rested solely on her shoulders. But Emily was starting to see that it wasn't as heavy a burden as she had imagined. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have all the answers. She just had to keep moving forward one step at a time. Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into the work on the ranch. She didn't have any grand plans or ambitions. She simply enjoyed the work, the routine, the way it made her feel grounded. She spent her mornings feeding the animals, her afternoons learning more about the ranch, and her evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sunset and reflecting on the day. There was something profoundly satisfying about the simplicity of it all. Jack was there with her, always in the background, offering support and guidance when needed. He never forced her to do more than she was ready for. Instead, he let her take the lead, trusting that she would find her own way in her own time. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Emily felt a shift inside her. She had been thinking a lot about her future, about what she wanted for herself, and for the first time she realized that she wanted more than just survival. She wanted to live. She wanted to experience joy, to find meaning in the small moments, to be part of something bigger than herself. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," Emily said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "But I do. I feel like I'm finally starting to live instead of just getting by." Jack smiled, his eyes filled with understanding. "You're stronger than you know, Emily. I've seen it every day." She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had Jack and she had herself. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. As the days continued to pass, Emily became more involved with the ranch, taking on new responsibilities and pushing herself to do things she never thought she could. It wasn't easy, and there were times when she doubted herself, but with each small victory her confidence grew. She wasn't just working on the ranch anymore. She was building a life for herself. Jack, as always, was there to guide her, to offer a word of encouragement when needed, but he never overstepped. He respected Emily's independence, knowing that she had to find her own way. It wasn't always perfect, but it was progress, and for Emily, that was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily stood at the edge of the ranch, looking out at the land she had come to love. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, a quiet contentment that had eluded her for so long. She wasn't the same woman who had arrived here months ago. She had changed. She had found something she never thought possible, a place where she truly belonged. And as she stood there, the wind in her hair and the stars beginning to appear overhead, she realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And that, she knew, was only the beginning. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a soft glow over the rough desert terrain. A cowboy, tired and worn from his long journey, rode his horse through the rugged landscape. The dry wind whipped against his face and his parched throat begged for water. He had been traveling for days, hoping to find shelter or work, anything to take his mind off the mistakes he'd made back in town. He had never meant to get into trouble, but life in the Wild West had a way of testing a man's patience. Outlaws, rough riders, and too many bad decisions had led him to the point where he found himself alone in the wilderness. He had no clear direction now, just the hope that he would find a place where he could rest, even for just a moment. As the day wore on, his horse's tired hooves began to drag. The cowboy looked around, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of life. It was late in the afternoon when he finally spotted something in the distance. A small Apache village nestled against the foot of a jagged cliff. He couldn't believe his luck. Maybe the people there would help him out. He approached cautiously, not wanting to make a scene. His mind raced, wondering what kind of reception he might receive. Would they be kind or suspicious? He had heard stories of the Apache tribe, brave, proud, and fiercely independent. Would they see him as an outsider? Or would they offer him the refuge he desperately needed? As he neared the village, he was greeted by a quiet, almost eerie calm. The village seemed peaceful, with women grinding grain in the shade and children playing by the river. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The cowboy felt an odd sense of peace as he dismounted from his horse and approached a woman sitting by a fire. She had sharp features with dark eyes that glinted in the fading sunlight. Her face was covered in the dust of the day, but her beauty was undeniable. "You look like you could use a rest," the woman said in a soft, melodic voice, her words carrying a hint of warmth. She was younger than he expected, perhaps in her early 20s, with long black hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Her attire was simple, consisting of a worn but well-made dress made from leather and cloth. The cowboy hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. He was exhausted, and the warmth of the fire called to him. He had been alone for so long, and there was something about the woman's gentle presence that made him feel at ease, even if only for a moment. "I could sure use a place to rest," he finally replied, his voice hoarse from days of traveling. "Just for a night, maybe." The woman nodded, motioning for him to follow her. Without another word, she led him to a small hut at the edge of the village. Inside it was humble but cozy. A small fire crackled in the center, filling the room with warmth. There was a simple bed made of animal furs, and the air smelled faintly of herbs and smoke. "I'll make some tea," the woman said as she began to gather herbs from a small pouch at her waist. You rest. You must be tired." The cowboy sat down on the bed, grateful for the kindness she offered. As she prepared the tea, he took off his boots and stretched out on the bed. His muscles ached and his mind was clouded with fatigue. The journey had taken a toll on him, both physically and mentally. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the day's journey lift off him for the first time in what felt like forever. The woman returned with a steaming cup of tea, and he accepted it gratefully. The warmth of the drink soothed his parched throat, and for the first time in days he felt a sense of comfort. "Thank you," he said softly, looking up at her. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. It was as if she knew something he didn't, something that made the moment feel both intimate and unsettling. "You're welcome," she replied quietly, her voice soft. "You're safe here, rest." The cowboy nodded, feeling his eyelids grow heavy. The fire crackled in the background, the heat of it lulling him into a state of deep relaxation. As his thoughts grew foggy, he didn't notice when the woman left the hut or how long she had been gone. The last thing he remembered was the warmth of the fire and the gentle sound of the wind outside. When the cowboy woke up, it was morning. The sunlight poured through the cracks in the walls, bathing the room in a soft golden light. His head felt foggy and his body was still heavy with sleep. But something wasn't right. The air was still, and there was no sound of the woman from last night. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake off the haze in his mind. He glanced around the hut, expecting to see the woman, but she was nowhere to be found. The room felt eerily quiet. He stood up, his legs shaky from the night's rest, and walked to the door. Stepping outside, he was greeted by the same peaceful silence he had noticed the day before. The village seemed deserted, with no sign of life anywhere. The children were no longer playing by the river, and the women who had been working earlier were nowhere to be seen. A sudden sense of unease crept over him. He had no idea where the woman had gone or what had happened in the night. The warmth of the tea still lingered in his stomach, but his head was spinning. It wasn't the drink that had him feeling off. It was the strange feeling that something was wrong. He wandered deeper into the village, looking for anyone who might offer an explanation, but found only silence. It was as if the entire village had vanished, leaving nothing but empty homes and quiet paths. There was no sign of the woman, and no one else was around to ask. The cowboy's gut twisted with suspicion. He had heard stories of tricksters and deceivers in the Wild West, but he hadn't expected to encounter one in this peaceful village. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for his holster. But it was only the old man he had briefly seen the day before. The old man approached slowly, his face grave. "You've been deceived, son," he said in a low voice. "She's not who you think she is." The cowboy stared at the man, confusion and suspicion growing in his mind. What was this old man talking about? Who was the woman, really? The old man's words echoed in the cowboy's mind. "She's not who you think she is." The cowboy turned to face him, his heart racing. His instincts had been telling him something wasn't right. But hearing those words made everything feel more real, more urgent. The old man's eyes were serious, filled with knowledge that the cowboy didn't have. He was a man who had lived long enough to see things others might miss. His weathered face was lined with years of experience, and there was a quiet strength in the way he stood. He wasn't afraid, and that made the cowboy feel uneasy. "Who is she?" the cowboy asked, his voice rough, still waking up from the haze of sleep. "What are you talking about?" The old man glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. The village, which had been bustling with life the night before, was now eerily still. No sounds of children laughing, no movement in the distance. It was as if the entire village had vanished. "Her name's Yiska," the old man said softly, "but the truth about her is something you'll wish you never learned." The cowboy's eyes narrowed. Yiska. That was the name of the woman who had helped him last night, who had offered him a place to stay. But now, as he thought about it, he realized there was something strange about the way she had behaved, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. She had been too perfect, too welcoming. "Why is she a problem?" the cowboy asked. "She seemed kind enough." The old man shook his head, his expression grave. "She's not just some girl looking to help a traveler. She's been sent by her people, sent to lure outsiders like you into their trap." The cowboy felt a chill run down his spine. "A trap? What kind of trap?" "She's part of a tribe," the old man continued. The Apache are known for their strength and their ability to survive in this harsh land. But there's more to them than most people understand. Yiska's role is more dangerous than you can imagine. She's a messenger sent to charm and deceive, and once she's done with someone, they never leave the way they came. The cowboy's mind raced. A messenger? What did that mean? Had he been a fool to trust her? He thought back to the way she had looked at him. Those dark eyes, the soft voice, the way she made him feel at ease when he had been on edge. Had it all been part of some plan? Why me? He asked, his voice tense.
Why would she choose me?
The old man sighed, looking off into the distance. Because you were vulnerable. You were alone, weak from your travels. That made you an easy target. Yiska and others like her know how to spot someone who's lost, someone who's searching for something, anything to ease their pain. They use that. They play on it, and when they have you, they have what they need. The cowboy was silent for a long moment. His thoughts swirled with confusion and regret. He had trusted Yiska, believed she was offering him kindness out of the goodness of her heart. But now it seemed like everything had been a lie. His body felt heavy, like he had been tricked into a corner he couldn't escape from. Where is she now? He asked, his voice low. Is she still in the village? The old man nodded. She's waiting for you to come to your senses, to realize what's happening. But don't think for a second that it will be easy to walk away from this. You're in deep now. The cowboy's heart pounded in his chest. Deep? What did that mean? He had thought he was just a traveler passing through. But now it seemed like he had walked straight into something much larger, something that could swallow him whole if he wasn't careful. Why didn't you warn me last night? The cowboy demanded. Why let me get so close to her? The old man's face softened. I wasn't sure you'd listen. Sometimes a man has to learn things for himself, but I could see the way she was looking at you, the way you trusted her. I knew it would only be a matter of time before you realized what she was really about. The cowboy took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. What now? What could he do to escape this situation? He couldn't just walk away from Yiska like nothing had happened. But if what the old man said was true, staying could mean something far worse. He had no choice but to confront her to find out the truth. I have to go, the cowboy said, his voice steady, though his heart was still hammering in his chest. I need to speak to her. The old man nodded grimly. I figured you'd say that. But be careful. She's not the only one who has her sights on you. The people she's working with are dangerous. You might be in more trouble than you realize. The cowboy didn't have time to think about the old man's words any longer. He turned on his heels and walked away, determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but there was one thing he knew for sure now. Yiska had a purpose, and it wasn't just kindness. As he walked through the village, the stillness seemed to grow heavier, more oppressive. The dust swirled around him in the wind, and the silence seemed to press in from all sides. There was no sign of life, just the abandoned buildings and empty paths. The cowboy's boots crunched on the dirt as he made his way toward the hut where he had spent the night. His hand rested on the handle of his revolver, his mind on high alert. When he reached the hut, he found the door slightly ajar. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open, stepping inside. The room was exactly as it had been when he left, but there was no sign of Yiska. No warmth from the fire, no smell of herbs in the air. It was as if she had vanished. Yiska? He called softly, his voice echoing in the silence. No answer. He stepped deeper into the room, scanning every corner. His heart raced as he realized there was no trace of her. She was gone. But what did that mean? Had she left, or was this just part of the plan? Was this all some sort of test to see if he would follow her? To see if he was willing to walk straight into whatever trap she had set? His gut twisted with fear and confusion. He didn't know who or what he was up against, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had just become a whole lot more complicated. And now, he had to find a way out of this mess before it was too late. The cowboy's mind raced as he stepped further into the empty hut, searching for any sign of Yiska. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had walked into something much bigger than himself. The silence around him was thick, almost suffocating. It was as if the entire village had vanished, leaving only memories of what had been. The fire from the night before was now nothing more than smoldering embers, and the scent of herbs had faded into the air. The room seemed empty, but his instincts told him that something was wrong. He had been with Yiska only hours before, and now she was gone as if she had never existed. He could hear the sound of his own breathing, but it felt as though he was the only one left in the world. Stepping cautiously, the cowboy examined every corner of the hut. The bed he had slept on was neatly made, but the sheets were cold, untouched since he had left. He wondered where she had gone. Had she planned all of this from the start? Or had something changed overnight? His mind was flooded with questions, but no answers came. The air felt heavy, thick with the tension of the unknown. The cowboy's thoughts swirled as he paced the room. He had trusted Yiska, and now he was left with nothing but confusion and a growing sense of dread. He had felt something special between them, something that had made him drop his guard for the first time in years. But now it all felt like a lie. The old man's words rang in his ears again. "She's not who you think she is." He could no longer ignore the suspicion that had been gnawing at him since the moment he woke up. What had Yiska been sent to do? What was her real mission? The cowboy had been in the Wild West long enough to know that nothing was as it seemed. And yet part of him had wanted to believe that this time things could be different. He was snapped from his thoughts by the sound of footsteps behind him. His heart skipped a beat as he spun around, ready to face whatever or whoever was there. But it was only Yiska. She stood at the doorway, framed by the dim light from outside, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the cowboy didn't know what to say. She was standing there so calm, so composed, but he could see something in her eyes, something he hadn't seen before. A flicker of uncertainty, guilt. He couldn't tell. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she stood there, her gaze locked with his. The tension between them was thick. The cowboy didn't know whether to be relieved or suspicious. After all that had happened, could he trust her? Could he believe that this was still the same woman he had spent the night with? Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry for the confusion," she said, her words measured. "I didn't want things to go this way." The cowboy's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What's going on here? Why did you bring me to this place? Why are you hiding all of this?" Yiska's eyes flickered briefly before she stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. The silence that followed felt heavy. She walked slowly toward him, and the cowboy's pulse quickened as she approached. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice quieter now, as though she were speaking to herself as much as to him. "But I have a duty to my people." The cowboy took a step back, his hand instinctively moving toward his revolver. "A duty? What kind of duty?" Yiska looked up at him, her expression both sad and determined. "I am a scout for my tribe. I was sent to watch over travelers, to find those who are vulnerable, like you." She paused, her eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his reaction. "But I never thought I would feel this connection." The cowboy's heart sank as he listened. The words he had feared hearing were coming out of her mouth. She had been sent to deceive him from the start. "It was all part of a plan, but why? Your tribe sent you to—" "What, to trick me?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "To use me for what? What do they want with a man like me?" Yiska looked away for a moment, her hands twisting together in a nervous gesture. "It's not what you think. I wasn't just sent to trick you. I was sent to test you. My people need help. We need someone strong, someone with experience in the outside world, someone who can help us protect our land, our way of life." The cowboy's mind was reeling. "You're telling me you need my help? After everything? After what you did?" Yiska nodded slowly, her eyes filled with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you, but the task I was given, it wasn't easy. I had to gain your trust to get close to you. I needed to know if you were the kind of man who could help us. The people in my village, they're in danger. The government is pushing us, taking our land, threatening everything we've worked for. I didn't have a choice but to follow orders." The cowboy's anger flared, but he forced himself to listen. He didn't know whether to feel sympathy for her or rage for the lies she had told. He had been a pawn in her game, a game that was more complicated than he had ever realized. "So you used me?" he asked, his voice tight with emotion. "You used me to get what you needed. You used my trust, my kindness to manipulate me into helping your people." Yiska looked down, shame filling her expression. "I never meant for it to be like this," she whispered. "I never meant for it to hurt you. I thought if I could just get close to you, you would understand. But I see now. I was wrong." The cowboy stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't know what to think. Part of him wanted to walk away, to turn his back on everything and leave this place behind. But another part of him, an old part, the part that still cared for the people he met, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that there was more to this than just a trick. Why tell me now? He asked quietly. Why not just leave me in the dark like you did last night? Yiska looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Because I can't live with the lie anymore. I didn't want to hurt you. And now that I've seen who you are, I realize that I can't use you like this. I can't be part of a plan that causes harm. The cowboy didn't know what to say. Part of him still wanted to believe her, but another part felt betrayed. The silence between them grew, and the weight of what she had confessed hung heavy in the air. I don't know what to do now, the cowboy said, his voice low. You've put me in a position I can't get out of. Yiska stepped closer, her voice pleading. I understand, but please, I'm asking for your help, for my people. The danger is real. If you walk away now, I can't promise you'll be safe. The cowboy looked at her, unsure of what to do. Could he trust her? Could he help her people, even after everything that had happened?